The Partial Breakaway Podcast with your hosts Nick and Junior and producer Vince, bringing you elite fantasy hockey information to help you win your fantasy leagues and win at life.
Episode 73.
Right on cue.
I did it well this time. We had a false start before, so I do apologize for that. Not that you guys will ever know about it, unless we actually said it. Guys, for fantasy, keeper, salary cap leagues, fantasy hockey leagues, please follow the Partial Breakaway Podcast. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, rate our content, join the discussion online. Guys, we had a lot of discussions this week. People messaged us on YouTube, people messaged us on TikTok, and we had some good discussions going there. Some people agreed, most people disagreed, but that's the greatest part about this, right? Guys, this was a really fun week for NHL content. We had the trade deadline, and we had some of our leagues.
Well, most leagues, their trade deadline is going to be Monday.
Most fantasy leagues, their trade deadline is coming up, and we've already seen some major movement in the fantasy land as well.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to break this up into 2 episodes. We're going to have part 1 this week, and then we're going to record part 2 next week because there's still trades going on until fantasy deadlines occur.
So this week is NHL trades, and next week will be fantasy.
Well, we're going to start with our waiver wire segment because I think it's important for people to know our record and also to give people an
Trevor
idea.
Moore, baby. Trevor Moore with the push.
So change it. That's good. So we need people to know how many teams are playing. Yes. Some of you are in your fantasy playoffs right now. So very important to know which teams are playing 4 games, which teams are playing 2 games. Some of these guys might be waiver wire pickups for you. We will give our suggestions. Please feel free to take them with a grain of salt, as we've been pretty above 500, but not very far above 500. Part 1 of the trade deadline episodes, we will be discussing the NHL trades and how it affects the fantasy value of all the people that moved, and the fantasy value of those who stayed or perhaps were left behind, is another way to say it.
Perhaps traded a second time.
Spoiler alert! Some head-to-head leagues start playoffs next week.
That's why I said, it's very important.
Or the week after that.
The waiver wire segment, we can't get rid of it. It's very important for people this week. We want to at least give you the information that you need to make informed decisions. Part 2, which will be recorded next week, then we're going to discuss trades that occurred in fantasy dynasty leagues, fantasy keeper leagues. If you guys want, send us in mailbag segment, send us in your trades. You could either send it to us on Twitter, on YouTube, in responding to this episode, Instagram, TikTok. You can reach us anywhere. Give us a little bit of context about what your league rules are, just a tad, and then give us the players that were actually traded, and we're going to discuss it on the air.
We'll put a post up probably tomorrow asking people to send us their trades.
And just to give you a little bit of preview of next week's episode, I think listener Bamia traded away Austin Matthews, David Pasternak, Kyle Connor, Hellebuck, Scheifele.
Morrissey's on the block.
Might be coming to me soon. We'll see. But basically speaking, we're talking about somebody that sold a lot of his superstar players. So there's a lot of content to talk about next week as well. Guys, before I continue, we are less than 5 minutes into this episode. Do you guys have anything to add in the intro, or shall we just get started with the waiver wires?
No, I'm good. Nick, go ahead.
Let's go.
All right, waiver wires it is. Cue the music for the waiver wires.
Nick, you gotta remind me which one is. We always change the waiver wire.
Well, we weren't very money this week, but
So it's this one.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
all right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Junior here. I will be taking care of the waiver wire pickups this week. Oh, we got some bling bling in the house.
This man
that came out pretty
literally-
nice, actually, Vince.
This man literally did not inform us that it actually came in. But
No, he did not.
custom made
This is a live reaction to Vince's
Own trophy.
gold chain. Okay, so tell us about it. What's this about?
So this, since the Four Nations, at the end of the day, made
That's freaking hilarious, by the way.
made a trophy for the winning nation. I thought it was just normal that we would make something for the person who won the fantasy draft of the Four Nations, and this could also be, the best co-host of the waiver wire could wear this also, and the winner of our season-long fantasy draft could also wear this. So
So I guess it's staying around your neck for quite a bit.
So I just thought it was,
This is the only trophy that counts, ladies and gentlemen. This is LPHL's championship trophy. But good for you.
Official
We have-
congratulations to
Yeah,
Vince.
we have to give congratulations where congratulations are due. This man came out of nowhere and showed us both up.
Yeah, definitely. No D strategy didn't work. Tell you that much.
No D is exactly Vince. All right.
All right. Boom. All right. So back to the waiver wire pickups, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, it is brought to you by Sportira. Sportira.apparel on Instagram. Give them a follow. Anything you need for corporate or sport uniforms and apparel, they are your provider. So hit them up. Like, subscribe, follow, and thank you to them for helping us with our apparel. Moving on. So last week, I got first dibs. I went with Trevor Moore, 40% rostered on Fantrax. He was playing 4 games. I thought he would get some points. Right now, he's at a goal and 1 assist. He still has a couple of minutes left in his game right now. So it is currently a push, which would take me to 5 wins, 5 losses, and 4 push. Vince, on the other hand, yes, carry on.
I didn't update those.
I updated it.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, good.
Vince, on the other hand, went with a defenseman, and for the first time this year, I believe, we did not get a loss with a defenseman. Alex Vlasic, 33% rostered. Vince basically selected him after Seth Jones got traded, seeing as Vlasic was going to get more opportunity. And he did, and he got 2 points in 4 games, giving him a push, which is 10 wins, 4 losses, and 1 push. His first push. You popped your cherry there, Vince.
Pum, pum, pum.
Lastly, Nick, who went with Ryan Strome of the Anaheim Ducks, also playing 4 games this week. Not successful, but
Still half a game left.
still half a game left. He's got 1 point in 3 games and 1 period. So,
So we're
we'll
hoping
see.
for him to get 2 points.
2 points for the win, 1 point for the push. So we will keep you up to date as things go. And if you didn't notice, that's why we got excited for Trevor Moore before it happened live on air. Our collective record is 19 wins, 17 losses, and 6 push in the event that things remain the same. This week, Vince, you got, I believe, no, Nick, you went first this week, right? Tell us, who's your pick
Well,
and why?
I went with Barrett Hayton, and I've gone with Barrett Hayton before. This is not the first time that I'm throwing my hat in Barrett Hayton's rink. 41% owned right now. Ladies and gentlemen, he's playing 4 games this week. The teams that he's playing against are not necessarily the most defensive. Anaheim, Seattle, Vancouver, I think are all teams that you could score on, more or less. Toronto's in there as well. That could be a high-scoring game. You never know, right? Depends if Joseph Woll's in the game and lets 5 in 7 shots or something like that. But all this to say that Barrett Hayton is currently playing with Dylan Guenther. And Dylan Guenther is a big reason why I think Barrett Hayton has a good chance of giving me a win this week. Not necessarily Hayton himself.
All right, I went second. Right? No, yes, I went second. So I went with Maki Samoskevich, 27% rostered on Fantrax of the Florida Panthers. I'm not sure where this guy came from, but he's suddenly on the number one power play in Florida. He has 3 points in his last 4 games, and in the last 2 games at 65 and 77% of the power play. So I'm going to try banking on that run until Marchand comes back. I think he'll keep his spot on the power play. And 7 shots on goal 2 games ago. So taking my chances with Maki Samoskevich.
4-game road trip.
4 games this week. Road trip, yes. But, yeah, whatever. Vince, who'd you go with?
I went with Philip Shiro. And their schedule is just pretty easy.
Hito.
They're playing the Habs, Calgary. Then they're playing Chicago and Utah. They have 3 out of the 4 games at home. Their away game is close. It's in Calgary, so it's not far from Vancouver. So he's had about a month to adapt to a new lifestyle in Vancouver. So I think this week might be the week where he puts it all together with his line mates, especially that they're not traveling. So that's why I went with him. He's 25% rostered, if I am not mistaken.
So to sum it up, Nick goes with Barrett Hayton of the Utah Hockey Club. Junior goes with Maki Samoskevich of the Florida Panthers. And Vince with Philip Hedl of the Vancouver Canucks, representing his bling bling.
Bling, bling.
All right, lastly, before we go, things you need to know in terms of schedule for this week. Calgary and Dallas only play 2 games. You might want to stay away from those players heading into possibly what is a playoff week. And playing 4 games this week is the Anaheim Ducks, the Colorado Avalanche, Detroit, Edmonton, Florida, the Rangers, the Senators, Utah, Vancouver, and Vegas. Ladies and gentlemen, that does it for our waiver wire pickups of the week.
Is anybody doing any waiver wires for our partial breakaway co-host league?
Ooh.
I'm not doing anything.
Let's do off air.
Okay,
Let's
perfect.
do off air.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money.
Vince is in the lead by 114 points, if anybody wants to know.
Nobody does.
I'm going to drop Jack Hughes off air.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, moving on. Guys, let's talk about trades.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
baby.
And there was some important ones.
We have a trade to announce.
So there was a lot of trades in the NHL, the trade deadline. We're basically going to break it down to the ones we think are fantasy relevant.
Relevant.
Relevant. Okay.
And we're off to a good start.
And there we go. So basically, I'm going to shoot out some trades, and then you guys let me know how relevant these are, or if there's certain players that are more relevant in fantasy because of the trade than others. We're good?
Good.
Let's go.
All right, so this trade was done before the trade deadline. It was Tampa Bay and Seattle. So Seattle sent Oliver Bjorkstrand, Yanni Gord, and a 2026 fifth-round pick to Tampa Bay for Michael Ismail, a 2025 second-round pick, 2026 first-round pick, and a 2027 first-round pick. So a steep price for 2 players. So what do you guys think? I don't think Yanni Gord would be fantasy relevant in this trade, but Nick, you said that you think Oliver Bjorkstrand would.
Absolutely. So the way I look at it is Tampa Bay, first of all, we know already is a high-scoring team. But who's playing with Braden Point right now that Kucherov is injured? Well, actually, Kucherov came back. Sorry, Oliver Bjorkstrand. Bjorkstrand. We love pronouncing names in this podcast. Is playing with Braden Point and Jake Gensel. And then you have Sorelli with Kucherov and Hagel. So we're talking about somebody that's playing in the top 6 of Tampa Bay. Instantly fantasy relevant. Mm-hmm. Now, Yanni Gord is playing on a third line. If you're like the DPR league that we're in and you count faceoffs, maybe he's somebody that you care about. Maybe in a very deep league. But no, I think the key here is Bjorkstrand is playing in a top 6 role on a high-scoring team like Tampa Bay. And do you remember what he was in Seattle?
Mm-hmm.
He would play
He was with a bunch of what do we call Seattle? A bunch of second and third
Second
liners.
liners,
a
yeah.
bunch of second liners, exactly.
Yeah.
So he didn't necessarily have the ice time in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually lowered his fantasy value in Seattle. Whereas here in Tampa Bay, I think you're going to see a difference. So in Seattle, he was averaging 15 minutes of ice time per game, 15:27 if you really want to be specific.
Okay.
So I think here we're going to see an uptick in the next few games.
Junior, anything to add?
Yeah, he's definitely fantasy relevant. I think it balances the lines a lot in Tampa Bay. And he also got 62% of the power play last game with Tampa Bay. He's on power play 1 and on line 1. So this could be a huge add heading into the playoffs. And just a quick note on Julien Brisebois and how he runs his team. And
He runs this team like Nick runs his LPHL team.
yeah, pretty much. So basically, this is his exact quote. I'd rather have a lineup full of good players than a bank of a ton of draft picks. And essentially, if you want to win,
Well, there's been some argument that this is not the way to go. And maybe if we have time at the end of this episode, I'll go over a argument discussion that I had with somebody who presented some pretty good points and see what kind of conclusion you guys come up with, because that's a good point, right? Vegas is going all in. They spend their first rounders. They draft guys, they send them away, right, in order to win. Tampa, Florida, Colorado, they all pretty much do similar things here. So it's this year, Toronto, for the first time ever, traded two first round draft picks.
yeah, and almost traded Marner. But anyways, we won't get to that.
But the point
We're
is,
not
is
talking
that
about trades that never happened, Junior.
the point is, though, is that there's a philosophy out there, and I think it's good to talk about for fantasy purposes as well.
There's one thing in the NHL since the salary cap is that your window of opportunity is not as long as it used to be. Before, you had teams like New Jersey that would have gone for like 10 years and been 15 years, been competitors or whatever. Because now, because of the salary cap, your window of opportunity is a little less. So when it's there, you need to go for it. It's just that simple.
Yeah, just a quick note. I know we spoke of Bjorkstrand himself, but what does that mean for players in Seattle now? Because that opens up a spot in the top 6 of Seattle. And I think with Jordan Eberle coming back, he does go on power play 1, but Burakovsky seems to be getting also a second line spot with a first power play.
Did Shane Wright
opportunity.
get pushed to the second line?
Shane Wright is centering the second line of Burakovsky and McCann.
Yeah, he was on the third.
He's been on fire, Shane Wright, actually.
Yeah.
He's been having a really good season.
Okay, so next trade, a little less more low key, but he's still a top, especially from Nick's aspect, he's still a top 6 forward. So it's a trade between Nashville and Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh traded away Michael Bunting and a 2026 fourth round pick for which I think Tommy Novak could be in this conversation also, and Luke Shen. So Junior, I'll start with you. Either Bunting, well, Luke Shen was, even when he was at his peak, he was never fantasy relevant. So Bunting and Novak, what can you tell me about these two players? Are these guys, even, let's say, pushing it to next year? Because obviously Pittsburgh is in a real rut this year. So are any of these two players fantasy relevant?
I mean, Bunting seems to go on these mini runs, but he's never really paced for more than 65 points in a season. So does that make him very fantasy relevant? I think if he averages out to 55 points, he could be fantasy relevant. I think he does a solid job on the power play, and Nashville's power play has been like pretty crap as of late. So he'll get that opportunity on the power play, which will make him fantasy relevant. And I always had a soft spot for Novak. I don't know, not a soft spot, but like I was always curious about this guy. And then he went on that very good season with Nashville 2 years ago, but couldn't seem to find his game back. So, I mean, I think it's a nice fit in Pittsburgh, but I mean, until we see what he can do, I don't know how fantasy relevant it's going to be. But he's definitely going to get more opportunity because there's nobody else there other than Crosby and Malkin.
So Nick, with those, let's say you're in a fantasy dynasty or keeper league, if you have any of these two players on your roster, are we keeping because there's a bigger upside next year because of the teams they got traded to?
Well, I think that you said that Nashville is going to rebound
Yeah, I believe so.
big
Yes.
time next year. At least that's what your idea is.
Mm-hmm.
And if Nashville rebounds big time next year, I think Bunting could replicate that. I mean, bottom of your lineup, but still top 6 player in there. He could still put up some points, like you said, maybe 55, maybe 60 points. So I think it's very important that you have at least you know where he is, right? Moving
And
forward.
Novak, we were all high on Novak at the beginning of the year because of the new additions Nashville did. So do you think he can put it together with Pittsburgh? Not sure there's going to be more talent around him in Pittsburgh, but can he put it together in Pittsburgh?
If you can't do it in Nashville, I question how much you could really do it in Pittsburgh. And unless they're planning to move Malkin to the wing, you're moving Crosby to the wing.
Right now, Daily
right.
Faceoff has Novak on the wing with Malkin.
Okay.
Okay.
So maybe as a winger, he produces differently, right? We've seen
Less-
that before.
less
Less responsibility,
responsibilities, yep.
more production. I think it's a watch list guy. Like, keep him on your watch list, see how he does from now until the end of the season. See if he's somebody that you might want to pick up next year.
Next year.
And
Exactly.
from Nashville, just a tidbit. Luke Evangelista was always a guy we were waiting for him to take the next step. And then when they signed all these players, he kind of had a ceiling he couldn't cross. And now with getting rid of Nyquist and what's it called? And Novak, he seems to be on the first line with Stamkos and O'Reilly.
But
and he's
Bunting,
been
I
doing
think, is
pretty good.
injured.
Bunting is injured. He's not scheduled on the lineup right now.
So I wonder if he takes that spot.
Yeah, that'll
Keep an
be,
eye on it.
keep
Okay.
an eye out. Yeah.
Okay.
Enough talking about Nashville.
Next trade. We can do this one quick. I just want to talk about it because he's going back to his old team. Vegas and Rangers. Riley Smith had a really good numbers when he played with Vegas, so he got traded back to Vegas. And like you said, Vegas, one of their only rookies that they had, Brendan Brisson, they send him back to the Rangers with a 3rd round pick in 2025. Riley Smith, can he come back to his fantasy numbers that he was pulling up with Vegas before signing with the Rangers?
Okay, so I'll just grab this very quickly. He had 59 points on the last year that he was with Vegas. The year before that, he had 56 points. So if we say that Bunting could be a bottom of the lineup guy, I think Riley Smith could be around there as well, right? Bottom of the lineup player. So can he rebound to 56, 59 points overall? Sure. I mean, 26 goals with Vegas wasn't bad in his last year there. So if he could replicate something like that, I think he becomes fantasy relevant.
Yeah, the difference between Vegas and Nashville is that Nashville doesn't have as stacked of a team. So Smith could find himself more in the bottom 6 than the top 6, but they move players around on that team regularly. So maybe.
So the first major trade that happened during the trade deadline, we're gonna go. It was between Colorado and the New York Islanders. New York Islanders traded Brock Nelson and William Dufour to the Colorado Avalanche, which I think we called on this podcast that we thought Brock Nelson was going to Colorado. And Islanders picked up Oliver. Oh, this is a tricky name because one of his letters is silent.
Actually,
No.
yeah, but they shipped him off.
Shillington, and then they traded him off.
Okay, so Oliver Shillington, Caleb Ritchie, who is the main piece that the Islanders got back, a 1st round pick in 2026. This year in the trade deadline, you see a lot of picks, and a lot of picks that went to other teams are in 2026. And the one reason is the 2025 draft this year is a little weaker than most drafts. And that's why a lot of teams were asking for 2026 or 2027 picks instead of 2025. And they got a conditional 3rd round pick in 2028. So, I mean, Brock Nelson just climbs the ladder over here. And does Callum Ritchie come out with the Islanders and become the player? He's still very young. I think he's still 20 or 21 years old. So does he get a better opportunity to show his skills with the Islanders?
Well, I don't think it's really. Caleb Ritchie was always known as a good prospect. And he was Colorado's one of, what if not the top. He was the top, I think, according to the Athletic, Colorado prospect.
In their program right now, yes.
So-
I have him, so yeah.
Callum Ritchie for me is a top 6, like a top sixer, and he goes to the Islanders who need a top 6 forward to complement the guy they drafted this year, maybe, right? And Callum Ritchie is known as a little bit of a playmaker. Maybe he sets up somebody like Cole Eiserman. So that might be the future. You're starting to look at some moves here from New York Islanders that are future related, and a first round pick in 2026, which is known to be a deep draft year, might pay a lot of dividend. However, guys, let's talk about Brock Nelson, because Nelson,
what a fit! Feels a perfect fit in Colorado.
What a player to get, because the center market was so bare. There was nobody that was available, and Brock Nelson, 11 points in the last 8 games. The guy was pacing, he was pacing for 58 points on a very bad year for the Islanders, but at least he had 20 goals already. Last year he had 34, the year before that 36. You're talking, the year before that 37. So you're talking about a guy that's a top 6 center, right? This is a no-brainer for Colorado. They absolutely got the best deal, I think, center-wise during the deadline. They got the best center available. They paid for that best center available, but they did it early enough to make sure that nobody else is going to be bidding. So I think this was a great deal. William Dufour has some upside. He has a very good shot. He just hasn't put it all together yet. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Emil Heinemann. Great shot, physical player, but just hasn't put it all together yet.
Junior, you have Brock Nelson in one of your leagues. What do you think about this trade?
Oh my gosh, I was very happy to see that it was Colorado, but at the same time, he was still productive with the Islanders. It's not to say that
I think he was as productive as he could be with the talent he had around him. Right? We could say this year with the Islanders, they had a lot of injuries. Their main player Barzal was out with a broken kneecap. Like
he was going. He went from
news, by the way, on Barzal might be that he does miss the remainder of the season and only comes back if the Islanders make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're in wild
it's the only
card.
smartest thing to do. You're not going to hurry the guy back.
There's a couple of things. He's got much younger wingers now, as opposed to what he had in the.
Who is he playing with Colorado right now?
Right now, it's Valeri Nishushkin, who's coming off a hat trick in his first game with Brock Nelson, and Jonathan Drouin.
Okay.
And he's on power play 2, though, not power play 1.
Okay.
But I still do think this was such a great fit. I think at worst, he stays steady and keeps producing as he was with the Islanders, but I do expect a little boost in production. And what I'll say about Callum Ritchie and the Islanders is the Islanders needed to make this deal. If they would have kept Brock Nelson, they would have done themselves such a disservice and set themselves back. And then I read today that Lou Lamoriello said, I don't rebuild because rebuilds take 10 years, and I'm not rebuilding for 10 years. Well, if you're not going to rebuild for 10 years, then you got to do moves like this where you get a Callum Ritchie
that has a high ceiling,
that has a decent ceiling that should and will be an NHLer and potentially even more, So for Islanders fans, I was happy for them that they pulled the trigger on this and got a first round pick in 2026.
Guys, I just want to say something. I know it's not, you mentioned his name, so I just want to throw it out there. The Avalanche have now won 10 straight games with Valeri Nichushkin in the lineup. Overall, Valeri Nichushkin is at 157 games won, 49 losses, 17 extra points. When he does play, when he doesn't play, 48 wins, 48 losses.
Yeah, he's a talented player. He had some things he had to fix with himself, but he's talented. And I think Islander fans are just exhaling that Noah Dobson didn't get moved. Because there was a lot of
talk about Noah Dobson.
A lot of traction and talk about Noah Dobson being moved, right? So I think
but I think Noah Dobson was being moved for a piece like Elias Pettersson. I think that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't think he was going to be for
I hope not. But the way
it'll be a hockey trade if he gets traded.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys, just with 2 minutes left in the game, it was 5-2 LA with 4 minutes into the third period. It is now 6-5 LA.
Stone, Eichel,
Hurdle has 2 goals.
Jesus.
Stone has a couple assists. Anyhow, it
Hurdle
seems
has,
like it's a very wild game with 2 minutes left.
Love it.
Hurdle made his little home in Vegas, so it's good.
27 goals on the year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Okay, so the next major trade, which didn't puzzle me, but it's just surprised me. And it's basically Edmonton Oilers getting Jake Wallman from the San Jose Sharks. San Jose got Carl Berglund and a conditional once again, conditional 2026 first round pick. The only reason this confused me a bit, not confused me, but puzzled me, was they signed Klingberg, they have Bouchard, they have Nurse. So Waldman is known to be an offensive defenseman. So
Makes a few defensive mistakes as
yeah,
well. He's
exactly.
more offensive.
But so now does this fantasy? He was very fantasy relevant with San Jose because he was a number one guy there. Now he's a number two guy. Where does that put him in fantasy perspective?
Well, we can't speak of this trade without saying how terrible the Detroit Red Wings look. Having paid, was it a second rounder to get rid of him to San Jose, who then flipped him for a first. Absolutely one of the most craziest things I've ever seen. Anyhow, back to Wallman with Edmonton, it's an automatic boost because of the forwards he has. They went to get him because they wanted puck movers coming out of the back end, and he's going to be able to do that first pass and get them out of their end quickly and effectively. Obviously, he's not going to get that power play one time, but he's going to get minutes, and he's going to get opportunity. I mean, you know what it takes, like a pass behind the net to McDavid who goes coast to coast. That's all it takes to get a point. So, hey, look, he already has a point in his first game with Edmonton. He got an assist. He played 24 minutes of ice time. Keep in mind, though, that Ekholm did not play.
Okay.
But 24 minutes of ice time, 3 shots on goal, 1 point.
Hits. He threw some big
He
in that
nailed
game.
Rantanen twice.
He nailed Rantanen hard.
So that was a really fun game.
He's pacing for 53 points this year.
For a defenseman,
Solid.
that is solid.
Solid for defense.
Very
right?
solid, yeah.
29 years old only. So, and a 3.4 million cap hit. I think it's.
Is he still under contract next year, or does he have?
That's a good question. I should have maybe looked that up.
I think he might.
I thought for sure. Why is it 3.4? It doesn't say. Let's see.
It's not this.
Here, I got it here.
You got it?
3.4. He's signed until 2025, 2026.
So next year.
So he has one more year.
One
at
more year.
3.4.
Yeah.
So that's good.
That's
So
good
he's not a
value.
rental, man. That's a solid move for Edmonton.
Do you think they're preparing themselves for Bouchard holding out
Perhaps.
for next year because Bouchard's are RFA?
It's a backup plan, if anything.
How much do you pay Bouchard?
Ooh, that's another question we're gonna answer.
That's an off-season question,
That's
Nick.
off-season question
All
we're gonna
right.
answer because
It's like asking, what do you pay Marner?
Yeah, exactly. Interesting questions. Okay,
Barner, I think Rantanen set the market.
I'm gonna just throw out his name. You let me know if you guys think Kuzmenko.
Yes, actually, we should speak
Okay,
about
so-
Kuzmenko.
So
He's playing top six
basically,
role right now.
LA, Philly traded Andrei Kuzmenko to LA and a 25th seventh round pick for a 2027 third round pick to Philly. Listen, Andrei Kuzmenko had a good season with Calgary when he was there. So can he bring back his relevance in fantasy?
Kuzmenko, his biggest knock was the fact that he was purely offensive and had no real defense to speak of. He's playing right now with one of the best defensive centers in the league,
Mr.
in
Kopitar.
Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe on the same line. I don't know how he is not fantasy relevant, right? He's got to be fantasy
They
relevant.
insulated him very well. Let me
They
tell you.
insulated him immediately. He is on pace for only 36 points this year, but he had 52 the year before this, or on pace for 52 the year before this. He had 73 points in his first year in Vancouver, coming over from. So, I mean, I think this is his chance. This is really his chance to cement himself in a top 6 role in LA. And they needed a little more firepower, I find.
Yeah, I'm not sold. I'm not sold. I went with when we spoke about him going to Philly. I went with the idea that on a new team he always seems to produce when he gets there. But another player who got traded twice this year.
Yes.
But I'm not sold on him in LA. I wouldn't expect big things from him or anything much really.
Okay. So our second major trade, which involves a Buffalo team who we honestly don't know what they're doing, but maybe you guys can explain it to me. So basically, Buffalo traded away Dylan Cousins, Denis Gilbert, and a 2022 second round pick to the Ottawa Senators, and they received defenseman Jacob Bernard Docker and Josh Norris. I'll start with you, Junior. We have Josh Norris in DPR league.
Have him in Llama too.
Because basically, if you look at the trade, it's Cousins for Norris. What can you tell?
yeah, you could simplify it.
Yeah,
in that
exactly.
fashion.
Because I mean, Docker had some upside, but not really. But so Cousins for Norris. So
Cousins' first game with Ottawa throws 9 hits,
Mm-hmm.
gets an assist. Not a bad start. But this is
Norris's first game with Buffalo, 0-0, 1 shot on goal.
So this is what I'm worried about. I'm legitimately worried that Norris went to a worse situation.
okay,
And can we say that both needed a change of scenery? I think Norris was doing not bad, but maybe that's the thought process here. They both needed a change of scenery, and we'll see what happens. Because Cousins has been on a downward spiral for the last 2 years. Barely fantasy relevant.
Since he signed his big contract.
Since he signed his contract, so we're talking $7 million?
Yeah.
$7 million producing with less than a point a game. No, sorry, even less than that, right? He's barely getting a point every 2 games. He's kind of knocked himself out of fantasy relevance. Now, long term, I think this really helps Cousins. It's a new team. It's a deeper team than Buffalo. And I like the move. Hopefully, this is his resurgence again, especially for listener Bamia, who just traded a boatload to get Cousins.
because he at the
He's
beginning
trying to acquire Norris too.
at the beginning of the year he was coming into the NHL season on a high because of what he did in the World Championships with Canada, and unfortunately, it didn't quite go as exactly as people were saying. So, Junior, what do you think? Like Josh Norris, is it done? Is his relevance in fantasy done because he's gone to Buffalo?
No, I don't think so. What determines his fantasy relevance is always going to be his injuries. The 54 games, 50 games, 8 games, 66, 56. Those are terrible numbers. He's definitely a Band-Aid boy, that's for sure. He's papier-mâché almost at this point. But I think it'll do him some good in Buffalo. But from Buffalo's perspective, I didn't understand it at all because you have Cousins, who's from an NHL, like a hockey perspective, not fantasy hockey. Cousins, he could be one of your leaders for a long time to come. He doesn't have to be the point producer, let's say, of a point per game, even if he's a 60-point player. But he could be your number 2, number 3 player. You know what you have in him. He does it all. Like he's a Swiss Army knife. And you go trade that away, a player you drafted in the top 10 for a player that can't play 60 games in a season. I feel like they just set themselves back. So, but from a fantasy perspective, I like Norris in Buffalo a lot.
You like Norris in Buffalo a lot?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, one thing's for sure is that Norris is American, and his American buddy Brady Tkachuk was not very happy about Norris being traded away. It was quite an emotional moment for him during the interviews. I'm surprised they actually interviewed him that fast after the trade, too. Feel for the kid. But one of his best friends was Josh Norris. But Josh Norris is an American-born player going back to the States. Dylan Cousins is a Canadian-born player coming back to Canada. So who knows if there's a little bit of that at play as well.
And there was no tariffs on this trade, so we're good.
No tariffs on this trade.
And almost 26, almost 25 years old. Still 2 very young guys.
Exactly.
So.
There's a lot of time for them to rebound.
I think this trade will know more in 2-3 years how the trade really was who really won this trade, because at this point they both got traded when at their lowest in their careers, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right, boys, are you ready for this big trade? The
boy.
the biggest of the big trades at trade deadline.
Oh, we're about half an hour in, almost 40 minutes in. Let's do the big one.
All right.
Oh,
so,
baby.
Carolina trading for Antonin, tried to sign him, gave him money, more money than a lot of people would have thought they would have given him. He just did not want to stay in Carolina. So Carolina says we need to get out of this right now. So this was the trade. Carolina sends Mikko Rantanen to Dallas. Dallas sent over Logan Stankoven, very young player who had a rookie year this year, right? It's his rookie season this year, Stankoven.
Correct.
Yes.
A
We
condition.
have him in DPR.
Once, oh man, I have to do my research after this. A conditional
After this?
no, it's because every draft pick is a 2026 or 2027.
Excuse me.
I have rarely seen a 2025 like first or second round draft pick that has been traded. So, anyway, so it's a conditional 2026 first round pick, a conditional 2028 first round pick, a third round pick in 2026, a third round pick in 2027. Both first picks, which is very important, are top 10 protected. So basically, if Dallas falls from grace in either 2026 or 2028 and get a top 10 pick, that pick that goes back to Dallas, and I think they get the year after, if I'm not mistaken. So, a lot to digest with this trade, especially with the Rantanen situation. So, Nick, start with Rantanen. Better situation in Dallas than in Carolina? Fantasy-wise, is it a best situation for him?
I think so. I think that, first of all, he's back in the West Coast. Right? He's a West Coast player. I think he has a bone to pick with Colorado trading him away. And this might be a nice first or second round matchup. So it's going to be some storylines to look at. Mikko Rantanen was on a very, very cold streak in Carolina. 2 points in his last 5 games with them. Comes into a Dallas team that's absolutely stacked. Signs a $12.5 million contract. Is it 12.5 or 12?
12.5, I think. Tax-free.
Anyways, doesn't matter. And
Tax-free
it's tax-free for 8 years. So he is fully in on board with Dallas. So Dallas all of a sudden was already a superpower. They just became the Cup favorites. You add him to Hintz and Robertson on the top line.
Wyatt Johnston,
Duchesne, Seguin,
Jamie
Jamie Ben,
Benn.
Dadonov.
Yeah.
Do we still have time to keep mentioning their top 6 players that are playing? Like,
Granlund?
Mason Marchment, Granlund. That was a great trade for Granlund,
from
right?
San Jose.
So, I mean, you're looking at this team and you're saying to yourself, you know what? This is an absolute star-studded team, and you just added the biggest star that was going to hit free agency, and you locked them up for 8 years. This is a home run for Dallas.
So before we talk about Stankoven Jr., I want your take on Rantanen.
Might have been best case scenario here. This or the failed trade that didn't go through with Toronto. That would have been nice for him too. But Nick said there's to be said. The system in Carolina is not for everyone. It didn't seem like it was for Rantanen. On top of all the mental drama he had to go through. So I think having some Finnish players already in Dallas too, not that he didn't have it in Carolina, but
His best friend, Sebastian Aho.
so, exactly. They're best friends, but sometimes it doesn't mean that you'll click on the ice. So
Carolina system, does it benefit or not benefit Stankoven now?
love it. I think it's a perfect fit. He's the hard-nosed grinder, works hard, talent. He's got it all in one. He's like a wrecking ball, but with talent. So, and I think
Probably one of the best young forecheckers coming out of that class, this rookie class.
Rob Brendamore, that's what it's all about. Forecheck, retrieve pucks.
Yeah, Rod
create
Bedman
space.
needs a guy who knows how to forecheck, played a 200-foot game, and have talent. And I agree. And
And he's got an engine that doesn't stop.
yeah,
And look, if you take a look at it, obviously Carolina fans are not going to be happy of losing Rantanen, but let's look at it from the beginning, right? And this has been like on Twitter all over the place. But if you think about it, they traded Nekash away. They got 2 first-round picks in Stankoven for Nekash. I'm simplifying again, but that would have made sense. That would have made sense to me as a trade. Nekash for Stankoven and 2 first-rounders. So the only thing is that Carolina, and I think O-Dog said this on TSN, Carolina's going for it now. They need a Rantanen. They don't need a project plus 2 first-round picks that are only going to be relevant in 3-4 years.
Yeah, but at what point is he a project? He was one of Dallas's best players in the playoffs last year.
True.
Right?
True.
So
Yeah. I don't think he's.
I think that can translate really well with Carolina.
He's not one of those young.
He's not
players.
Rantanen.
No,
he's not a Rantanen.
But Rantanen wasn't adapting very well with the Carolina system either, right? So
But we all agreed that we thought Carolina needed a center. I know Rantanen can play center, but they didn't get him to play center.
yeah. Listen,
So they still have that
Aho
hole.
and KK as second center. I'm sorry, but I know there's a lot. Of
I don't think
KKs
this is the real second line. By the way,
Yeah, it's
I
probably
think this
Jordan
is the real
Stahl, Seth
Jordan
Jarvis.
Stahl, Martinic, and Jarvis
Seth
is the real
Jarvis,
second
yeah.
line. Because what he does is he splits his lines up, right? So
As I'm telling you, come the beginning of next season, their second line center is going to be Elias Pettersson. I think it happened too. So what the GM was saying, the Carolina GM, what he did say is that the Rantanen situation took too long to finalize with Dallas, that he didn't have enough time to go get something else. But he wanted to go add to a center to his team. So I think if I had to guess, Pettersson's going to end up on this
there was
team.
a lot of teams in on Rantanen. The only thing is, all the teams that were traded for Rantanen wanted a contract extension with it. Toronto had a huge deal with for Rantanen. I think they were giving away Mitten. They were giving away
Cohen.
Was Matthew Nice in the
No, it was like
It was
2 first.
It was
and,
2 first, Cohen, Minton. But anyways, these are all
Yeah.
But
rumors.
that became that when Marner said he wouldn't agree to a trade.
Okay.
Marner uses no trade clause not to go.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Wow.
What a slap in the face.
All right. So
For who? For who?
What a slap in the face to Marner.
Yeah, to Marner, absolutely.
And then he showed up and scored 2 goals in the first game after the deadline.
Marner is not resigning. There goes his microphone.
We're back, baby.
you need to stop using your hands when you talk.
I don't know why I love Marner so much.
Yeah,
Anyways.
but Marner is not going back to Toronto. But this is
Excuse
another conversation for the off season. Okay, so the next, I'll still say it's
it makes for good TV.
it's there's some relevance
This is
in
the
this
water.
trade. Once again, it involves Colorado. Boston traded away Charlie Cole to Colorado for a 5th round pick in 2026. Colorado got a Boston boy in Casey Middlestad, William Zellers, and a 2025 second round pick. So Middlestad was fantasy relevant in Colorado, but I don't think he hit the wall, the ceiling everybody thought he was going to hit with playing with the players he did. Boston, the way they traded all their players except for Pasternak, what are we looking for Casey Middlestad right now?
Okay, so the first thing that I'm gonna say is that Middlestat failed the experiment that they had for him because they were expecting him to be a second line center over there, and that's not exactly what he was providing. And so because he wasn't providing it, right? Because he was, he had 57 points last year. And he was on pace for 45 points this year. So not necessarily top 6 numbers, right? Or at least not for a cup contender.
No, exactly.
So I think that's where they came around and said, you know what, I'm sorry, but this is just not working out for us. We need a better top 6 center. And they went out and they got Nelson, which we already spoke about. So now you have your top 6 center in Nelson. What are you going to use Middlestat for? Is he good enough as a checker, as a third-line checker? Why don't we go out and get a third-line checker? And that's what they did. They went out in this trade and they got Coyle.
They essentially got the 2 best centers at the deadline.
That's it. That's it. So this works out. Well, if you don't count Cousins and Norris.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
But they traded for each other. So anyways, we're not talking about that. This, I think, makes so much sense for Colorado. Boston, you got a second round pick out of it. You got Zellers, who's a prospect, and you got a Middlestat. You're starting to rebuild. Congratulations. Sorry to hear it.
Yeah,
Because I like when Boston's relevant and they have a battle with Toronto.
yeah, but
I just find they're just
there might
not
be
gonna
just a retool. Huh? They still have McAvoy. They still have Pasternak. They still have some players there. So I think it might just be a retool.
a retool on the fly type thing, right?
I think the biggest thing with Boston, I think that hurt them was that DeBrusque walked away from them this year, and I think they really missed him more than anything else.
I think Bergeron retiring,
exactly.
and
They never filled that number 1 center
They
role.
couldn't.
No,
they
they
tried
couldn't.
with
They
Zaka.
Tried with Lindholm,
They tried
Zaka.
with Lindholm was a big fail.
Lindholm was so far he's still signed, but right now the first year was a big fail for sure.
But You know what? I think Middlestat will find common ground in Boston. I think he'll settle himself in. Like, he's not a point per game player. I don't think. You're
don't
looking.
have-
You're looking at the 50 to 60 point range. That's what it is with Middlestat. And what's promising is that he has almost 76% of the power play in his first game with Boston. So give me a chance with Pasternak on the power play. I think it should help boost his production because I don't think he was getting power play one time in Colorado. There wasn't enough room for him there. So, yeah, in terms of fantasy relevance, if you have Casey Middlestat, I think for me, it would be like a bit of a hold
For
at
now.
this point. For now, yeah.
We'll talk about him just because he's always in the relevance of fantasy, just because of the amount of shots he gets on, on the shots he gets on him, and also just if one of you can tell me what Detroit's doing, I'd gladly listen. But Detroit traded Joe Veleno, Montreal boy, to Chicago, and they got back Peter Mrazek, the goalie, and Craig Smith, a center. Now, I think this might be the 10th goalie Detroit has in their roster.
Well, they got rid of Husso, so they had to bring one in, right?
So, like,
Man, that's wild.
is Mrazek number one in Detroit right now?
I would think so.
Or because even Talbot, they have. So, just to
And they
sum it
have
up, they have
Lyon.
Talbot, they have Mrazek, they have Jack Campbell that they sent down,
Lion.
and they have Lyon. And
They-
then
they have Kosa
and then
that's
they
in
have
the
Kosa, who's
Grand
AHL, yeah,
Rapids.
but he's young. So
Trey Augustine that they drafted.
So, like, did they get Mrazek just for that playoff push to get into the playoffs?
I think they just tried to make a move to give their team a boost and without going too crazy. And this is what they did. But so who's the 1-2 now? It's got to be Mrazek and Talbot, or is it Mrazek and Lyon? I don't know.
Nick?
I kind of like I kind of like the acquisition for them. I think they could have used an upgrade, but yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what they're doing.
I'm as confused as you. I mean, I like Mrazek. I just don't know if he's a number one.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's
a
what,
journeyman.
1B journeyman.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's good for depth. Is it great for Detroit? I don't know if it really helps them that much. So, look, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, if we take a look at Detroit's depth chart right now, on their goaltenders, are we really looking like daily faceoff, right? Has Talbot, Lyon, Mrazek.
So there's 3 goalies on their current roster right now, which is Mrazek, Talbot, and Lyon. Mrazek and Talbot both are under contract for next year as well.
And
But
Mrazek's a little bit older, right?
So we'll say,
So Talbot's 37, Mrazek's
Sorry,
33.
that's what I meant to say. I meant Talbot is a little bit older, so Mrazek comes in as the most expensive goaltender right off the bat.
okay, so the next trade, which, man, there was rumors that he might get traded away, but he was a Boston boy for life. So I think there was a bit of spiciness behind the scenes with Marchand and the Boston Bruins. So Boston basically traded Brad Marchand to the Florida Panthers for a conditional second-round pick in 2027. The second-round pick becomes a 2027 or 2028 first-round pick if Florida wins 2 rounds in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, so basically it's a first rounder.
So yeah,
And Marchand
Unless they
plays,
get eliminated in the first.
and Marchand plays 50% of the team's playoffs games.
yes,
which he will.
exactly, which he will.
Marchand was always known as Wolverine back in the
Yeah.
day. He comes back fast from injuries.
So now Florida sees themselves with Marchand and Kachuk
And Bennett.
and Bennett. Wow. So Marchand is with Boston this year. We saw that his age really showed. His relevance came a little down because also the talent around him wasn't there. With the talent that he's getting injected to with Florida, does he become relevant again? He's injured right now, obviously. But
I think he was.
he was-
go ahead.
Sorry, I think he was always relevant.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You know, he was on pace for 63 points this year. Okay, a little bit down from the 67 points the year before that, and 75 points the year before that. Obviously, he's not a 100-point player on pace for like he has done in the past. So I agree with you there, but still relevant. Now all of a sudden he goes to a line where, wow,
Man.
Can you say like I saw this one picture of a rat, and a rat, and it's the first line of the Detroit the mascot from Florida Panthers, basically with their faces stuck on them. Anyways, it was funny.
Well, don't the Panthers fans throw rats on the ice? Because
That's right.
so-
Exactly. So
Mellenby.
it's,
Yeah, Mellenby,
Scott Mellenby.
that run to the final there.
That's right. So I mean, to me, he fits right in on that line, and I pity the Toronto Maple Leafs who will go up against that line, and I think that's why they went out and got Brandon Carlo. But what a
Brandon Marchand, you mean? Brad Marchand?
not
No,
Carlo.
Toronto went
Oh,
to
Toronto,
Toronto.
yes,
grabbed
yes, sorry,
Carlo.
sorry. Yeah, we're going to talk about that trade next.
Yeah. So, anyways, this is just fun. This is going to be an entertainment.
Yeah.
Do I think he has more fantasy relevance in Florida? I think so because he's playing with better players.
Okay.
But I don't know if he has the same ice time that he did in Boston. So we'll see. It might be a
Yeah,
give and take.
Junior?
I think it's going to end up evening out, or maybe he'll gain like 5 or 6 points. But man, what a fit, and what a mess. So because Junior TMZ here, no, but it's been reported that he asked for a meeting with Sweeney because they couldn't come to terms with to a contract, and he's like, "Look, I'm willing to bend. I'll compromise if you're willing to compromise, and we'll get somewhere." And Boston didn't budge. No compromise. So said, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah, I mean
do
the
that to your
TMZ,
captain and-
the TMZ person in you is probably going to report.
Well,
$3
so
million.
I should give credit to Elliot Friedman because it came straight out of his mouth.
$3 million was
What?
the offer they gave or something like that.
Yeah.
TMC to me.
No,
Boston to Marchand.
if you got an offer for $3 million, I don't know what the hell you're still doing
exactly.
on this podcast.
Okay,
Passion.
So keeping with Boston and seeing that they're kind of retooling, they did get a good young player that has potential. And a good return for a defenseman that, I don't know, basically Toronto got Brandon Carlo from Boston, and Boston got Fraser Mitten, which we can say is the second best prospect on that Toronto team, besides Nyes and, third because Cohen, I would put Cohen in front of him. A conditional 2026 first round pick and a fourth round pick in 2020. So they still got a first for Brandon Carlo and a blue chip prospect. So Carlo won't have fantasy relevance in
Outside
Toronto.
of hit leagues.
No, but are we picking up Mittens now for next year because he'll have a role on the top 6 of Boston?
Is he?
I don't know. I'm asking. That's
No, I don't know if he's a top 6.
That's why I'm asking you, experts.
Well, experts. I think Minton. I think Minton's a good player, and I think he'll find a role as a middle 6 player.
Okay.
I just don't think he's a top 6 guaranteed top 6 player.
So
There's a lot of hype on him. A lot of reason is because he's from Toronto, or he was a draft pick of Toronto, and Toronto tends to hype up their players a lot. Like Cowan, a lot of people talking about him as a top liner. I don't see him as a top liner.
Same.
Right? And I kind of feel the same way about Minton. He's maybe a middle 6 player, good penalty killer, good that kind of mold he turns into in his career. And I think he's going to be a good player for Boston. I just don't know if
he does the little things, right? He's not flashy. He's not like a great point producer, but like he's a good forechecker. He can play penalty kill.
if we're projecting to the NHL, right?
Yeah. So, but like you said, opportunity will make him a top 6 player, at least to start during this retool, if he gets opportunity next year. But in terms of point production, look, in the Western Hockey League, which is one of the most high-scoring leagues, junior leagues there is, was a point per game player, just a little under point per game player. So, if he was really, really a point getter, you'd see those numbers inflate a little bit. And this year with the Marlies, 13 points in 26 games. So, like you said, I don't expect like a super point producer here, but given that Boston is retooling, he will have a bit of an opportunity. And who knows, maybe he's on a line with Pasternak and
Listen,
things happen.
time will tell. If you have him on your team, you definitely keep him just to see where he goes from here with Boston. And then,
Before we move on from
go ahead.
Minton, because I know we're gonna get people yelling at us and stuff.
no, because
from
now he's
Toronto.
not with Toronto anymore, so it doesn't matter.
No, they're still gonna say, he's The guy had a 1% star probability on hockey prospecting.
Okay.
He's 31% chance of becoming an NHLer according to hockey prospecting. We're not talking about a top 6 player here. His like Ben Johnson, Dan Frisch, who never made it, Dmitry Semenov, Connor James, Cam. These are his comps. Like you're talking about bottom 6.
Okay.
You know,
He's a role player.
role playing.
Okay, so now the second biggest trade deadline.
Oh shit! I thought we were done.
Yeah, the Utah Hockey Club gets Shea Weber. Like, this is huge, isn't it? Shea Weber.
No, they had the Shea Weber. They traded him to Chicago.
No. Yes, they traded him. No, here says they received.
They received Shea Weber.
So they got him back.
Yes.
Yeah, they got him back.
They got him back.
That's
from
amazing.
Chicago for a 5th round pick.
Well, listen, if listener Adam is listening, he's huge on Akurati, or
Aku, it's not the same as Ratti.
It's not the same Ratti, but he loves Akurati because he made a mistake and drafted this guy instead of the other guy, and he's fell in love with him ever since. So, listener Adam, if you're listening, this one's for you. He got traded to Utah, so good for you.
So one more trade I'll just talk about, because he was doing fairly well with San Jose. Fabian Zetterlund gets traded to Ottawa with Tristan Robbins and a 4th round pick in 2025 for Noah Gregor, Zach Oshchak, and a 2025 2nd round pick. So, like, if I'm not mistaken, Zetterlund had 25 goals already this year. Was he around that that pace?
Zetterlund had 17 goals and
17.
19 assists.
Okay,
So 36 points in 64 games.
So with Ottawa, is he getting top 6 minutes? Is he getting lower 6 minutes? Because I know Ottawa, the lines, if I saw it correctly, there was on second line, it was Perron.
It was Perron, Cousins, and Batherson.
Yeah, exactly.
If they could replace Perron with a Zetterlund, I think that adds a bit more punch. I like the move for Ottawa, to be honest, and I think he's also under contract for another year. It brings down Perron with Shane Pinto on the 3rd line.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like they're missing a little something, Ottawa on the wing there, but Zetterlund for this playoff push, I think could be serviceable for sure, and fantasy relevant too. I'm curious to see if he'll. I don't see who he's going to take off the first power play. Jake Batherson, Claude Giroux, I think they're there to stay. So he'll get power play 2 time, but he'll be at least a top 6 player, I think, in Ottawa.
I don't think there's any other trades to talk about. But do you guys, team wise, do you guys see any big winners, big losers, teams that stay status quo in this trade deadline this year?
I think, given the situation, from not just the trade deadline, I think Colorado is a big winner because of the situation they were in with Rantanen. Maybe it was their fault, maybe it wasn't. I don't know if we'll ever know.
Mm-hmm.
But given that situation, they still managed to get who's been just as productive maybe as Rantanen was at the time. Filled their 2nd line center role, filled their 3rd line center role. They really have a team ready to compete in the playoffs. So I look forward to see how good they can be. And for me, they're the winners heading into the final stretch here.
Nick, a team that's a winner at trade deadline.
I think Dallas is by far the easiest.
Mm-hmm.
I really like what Toronto did late by adding Carlo. I think that's gonna be pretty good for them. There was a Florida is just fun. I don't know if they're really a winner, but it's tough. I was Scott Lawton is not bad for Toronto. They got a 3rd line center.
Oh my gosh, such an overreaction
Carlo.
to that. Give me a break.
I got someone.
What do you mean?
Who's Scott Lawton?
He's a good 3rd liner.
There was so many good 3rd liners out there. He
there
played like
wasn't.
12 games this year, not even.
I'll give you a surprise team who I think not fantasy relevant, but that made quiet moves to improve the team. The Winnipeg Jets. I think by picking up Brandon Tanev as a left winger and Luke Shen as a defenseman, a solid stay-at-home defenseman, I think they tightened up that group that was already very well balanced and tightened up. So the playoffs will be very interesting.
Again, that 2nd line center role, Winnipeg. That's
They're hoping
That's might be the difference between them and Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. Big losers. Is there any teams that really just shat the bed at trade deadline?
I know Habs fans want to say Montreal because they stood pat and they didn't sell and they didn't buy. I think it's fine. You wouldn't have gotten much anyways for a Savard.
Well,
You wouldn't have gotten much for a second round pick in this year's draft.
listen,
Are you really? Do you really care?
with Montreal, the one thing with Montreal that I'll say is if the stories are true about Nick Suzuki going into Hughes' office and saying, listen, we'd like to keep this group together, and Hughes says, well, you got 5 games before the trade deadline. If you do what you have to do, then, and they went on a 5 wins, 0 losses, 0 ties. So, that was one of the things. So I respect that Hughes went there and just said, you know what, you walked the walk. So now here, I didn't trade anybody. Your team stayed packed, and so it will be a very interesting. But
Yeah, there's people on Twitter that disagree with that, right?
Yeah.
And think that we should have gotten something and maximize and maximize and maximize. At some point, it's not an Excel sheet, a hockey team. And you have to remember that, right? There's people that want to keep their friends around as well. And again, I don't think you would have gotten much more than a second, maybe a third.
I think the LA Kings are the biggest losers.
yeah,
They're currently third in their division, only 3 points out of the second wild card. Like, that's how close Calgary is. And all you did was go acquire Kuzmenko.
it will be interesting. Next week's episode is going to be even more interesting because there is a lot of big names that
Oh,
got traded in
baby.
fantasy. So once again, if you
Austin
have
Matthews, an official member of the Smash Bros.
Nick, how about you tell if they have any trades? How do they get it to us? So that we
Guys,
can talk about it?
reach out to us on Twitter, reach out to us on YouTube, reach out to us on TikTok. You could send us messages, direct messages on all of these platforms, Instagram, and we could go ahead and add your trade to our show next week. We already have quite a few trades from LPHL to talk about, so that's going to be fun. And there's more going down as we were recording this podcast. There's another big one that happened. So it's going to be fun. Next week we're going to talk philosophy about trades, and we're also going to go through all these trade deadline trades that occurred in fantasy league. So that's part 2 coming up next week.
Have a good night, peeps.
Have a good week,
Thank
everybody.
you for joining.
This guy's shutting lights over here.